I'd like to invite you to stand and stretch for a moment. Look around the room, see who's here. Look around the Zoom room. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. My name is Thea, and I'm your Dharma leader for the evening. So it's Wednesday night. It's our custom to gather, reflect on the Dhamma for the way it is. The title of the talk tonight is How to Live Less from Habit and More from Presence. And the way that I plan for us to explore that is to, first of all, look at the parts of a life. And I'll use my life. That's the one that I know, but I invite you to track with me and look at your life. And then we're going to investigate patterns in our lives, things that we experience personally, through tasking and even through larger cosmic rhythms, kind of sort those out a little bit. And then third, we're going to glimpse how maybe we have constructed a sense of self out of patterns and habits and experiences. So the aspiration behind tonight's talk is to inspire and inform and maybe create ways that we can live less from a mindless place and more from an awakened heart. So let's begin. I have two chats here. Let me make sure that everything is good. It looks like it is. Start with a quote from the Buddha. He says, "I do not see even one other thing that when tamed, guarded, protected, and restrained leads to such great good or benefit as the mind." So now let's use our beautiful minds and start to look at these patterns, these rhythms, the seasons, basically anything that repeats in your life is what I want you to consider tonight. For some reason, this practice has been helping me to more clearly see the Dhamma, to see things as they are, to have some insight. So I'm hoping this might work for you too. I've noticed that whenever I become aware of something, in this case, patterns and habits, rhythms, so to speak, and I make myself available to that, often that thing begins to show itself to me more regularly. This is a phenomenon known as synchronicity. So each day we have an opportunity for reflection, for contemplation. This is an ability that humans have for deep contemplation, and it's a profound gift. When this gift is honed with a regular, systematic practice of meditation, it often produces insight into the way things are. So because we are able to use this, we can inquire all throughout the day. Am I really present in my body? Am I just going through the motions? I can report that public speaking is one of the toughest times to stay in your body. So I'm working on that right now. The Buddha instructs us in the Satipatthana Sutta to pay attention all the time, basically to everything. So this is really hard to do. Even paying attention some of the time, though, will bear some noticeable and measurable results. So as I said, I'm noticing rhythms, seasons, patterns, things repeating that happen around me, as well as my own actions, ideas, and feelings that occur daily, weekly, annually. Many of them, like my love for study and practicing design, have helped to shape my life. And as I grow older, I can easily see the things that I've done or thought the most often are directly related to how I currently view myself. And it's played a part in who I married and who I have become, so to speak. So now from a Buddhist perspective, this is an interesting thing to ponder, a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I'm proposing tonight that we explore the parts of our experience that have contributed to building the person that we take ourselves to be. On the other hand, we're taught the concept of not self, or anatta, as one of the three main tenets or characteristics of our very existence, along with suffering and impermanence. So which is it, self or not self? Can it be both? Tonight I say it must be both. Training the mind and heart using the Buddhist teachings is like developing a fluency to move between worlds of self and not self, learning to be skillful in both worlds while humbly bowing in respect to the mystery of each world, the well-known shiny world of being and the lesser known shimmering world of not being. So back to patterns. Malcolm Gladwell, author of the popular book Outliers, wrote that it takes 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to become an expert in anything. So maybe if we do anything mindfully and repeatedly for at least an hour a day, in about 30 years, we'd be an expert in that thing. So I've done a lot of things for at least an hour a day for the past 30 years, and I do think I'm pretty mindful. So by now, I think I should be an expert at feeding and scooping poop for cats, grocery shopping, eating in restaurants, working in the garden. These are all on my repeating pattern list. So what are you repeatedly thinking and doing, becoming an expert in? I invite you tonight to ponder that. Let's acknowledge, before we go further, a well-known cosmic repeating pattern. The summer solstice happened yesterday, June 21st. The earth tilted towards the sun, causing the sun to appear high in the sky, and gave us the longest amount of daylight hours in a single day for this whole year. Traditionally, this is the belly, the midpoint, the fullness of the year, a solar year. And it's an example of the way it is, a natural law, a pattern on a cosmic level that's been tracked for the past 2,500 years, because we know that Stonehenge was built around this. So does it affect us? Well, for me, it meant that I worked a little longer on my laptop. I ate dinner much later than usual, and then I ran around watering the yard until the sun went down. More hours in the day means getting more stuff done. Very different patterns than my patterns in February, which could have me hibernating in bed with a book by 8:30 at night. So time for a quick sidebar here. Remember that the word Dhamma has many meanings. It can be used to describe the laws of nature, including the workings of the universe, microscopic worlds, the way a certain seed produces a particular plant and fruit. It's the immutable cause and effect law that we think about, that we actually don't think about, we just accept it. We don't pay that much attention to it. And Dhamma, the same word, is usually capitalized here, is used to describe these teachings of the Buddha that are referred to here at IMC Charlotte as our main source of contemplation and wisdom. The Buddha referred to these natural patterns and the habits of plants and animals in his teachings. The word vipassana, from which our tradition comes, means insight, or how it is. So both meanings are tied together and overlap. And my offering to you tonight is very much about these observable causes and conditions, cause and effect. Now, I hope you're still with me. I'm inviting you tonight to go on a particular Dhamma journey, looking for more patterns, connections, the markers in your own life, so you can see the way it is for you and have insight about which of your patterns is beneficial, bearing contentment, and which may be causing confusion or stress or even harming you. Okay, you may say, so what if I see patterns and rhythms in my life? Who cares? Well, you would be right. It may not matter much to others about your patterns until it affects them. You seeing and adjusting even one thing in your life that could be shifted. Just seeing attachment, for example, and being willing to loosen up a little bit. Or seeing a pattern of emotional melancholy and being willing to shift just a bit to a lighter thought. Just doing that one thing on a regular basis can significantly change the quality of your life and affect your relationships with others. I've experienced both of these for myself. So let's go back to noticing patterns. The breath is the most easily observable rhythm or pattern in your body, a very personal pattern, a grounding, constant, life-giving rhythm. We use it to connect with what's happening here. We use it to train our minds to focus and to even bring calm in times of anxiousness. Without thinking much about it, we use it to keep us alive. So what occurs like a rhythm or a pattern for you in your life? Some are chosen, like our sitting time in the morning. I sit in the morning. This is usually one of the times I appreciate the most in the day, and I'm unwilling to move or change this. And guess what? I discovered that when I looked at this pattern, I see a lot of attachment here. I don't want to sit in the afternoon. And just to shake part of that up, for after 5 years of using this same app, I decided it was time to stop using it and time to look at the little gold stars that had accumulated and let go of my attachment to that. So now I just sit and I realize that my body keeps perfect time for 30 minutes. It's so used to that I can just keep time. So I've learned 2 things just from that small shift. So other repeating rhythms that are tasks could be doing the laundry, putting gas in the car, tidying the house. These are done usually without thinking because they just need to get done. And there's nothing wrong with that. Although I've heard we can have nibbana at the gas pump. I'm pretty sure. Remember Jack Kornfield's book, After the Ecstasy, The Laundry? It seems this is how the heart grows wise, being present to these little things. This is our life, after all. Noticing how the gas cap works, folding the clothes of your loved one, being happy that they're in your life and you in theirs, that there's fuel for your car, even though it's almost $5 a gallon, and that maybe you have enough money to buy it. This is where mindfulness lives, in daily gratitude for small things. So I imagine that many of us here have a daily sitting practice, and when we sit, one thing that we might notice is that we cannot really control our lives. Our bodies are certainly not under our control, and barely our minds. We cannot know for certain what's going to happen next. This insight, just this simple insight, seems to offer humility and help us inhabit our lives with more presence. After all, it's true that anything can happen at any time. And I'd like to say this to myself. I think of a time at the beach with John when we walked way up to the end of a long beach one day. We found some lunch, and as we finished our meal, glorious day, the sky suddenly turned black. The wind began to blow. It dropped 10 degrees and a huge storm front rolled in full force. After waiting a while for it to pass, we noticed that the streets were beginning to flood. So much for calling a car. We decided we had to walk back to our house. And so we sprinted out onto the beach, into the fierce wind, sharp raindrops pelting my face so hard that I had to put on my sunglasses to be able to open my eyes. We, of course, were the only people on the beach, except for 2 maniacs training for God knows what. Water was coming off of us in sheets. We were running into the wind, but it felt like slow motion. At some point, I started laughing, and soon John was cracking up too. We could not stop laughing. Every time we looked at each other, 2 crazy drowned rats leaning into the wind in our cute, sopping wet little beach outfits. We couldn't even hear each other over the wind. It was exhilarating. It was hilarious. We were so lucky not to be struck by lightning. This story has a happy ending. We made it, but that's not always the case. Reality comes in the form of the unexpected, says Nisargadatta Maharaj. We touched on a cosmic rhythm that day, and tonight we've touched on personal rhythms and tasking rhythms. So let's look at emotional patterns. This is a great place to work. So for me, working with uncertainty is one of the things that I'm doing. I thought when I was in my 20s and I was still sorting out my life, that when I was older, things would be certain, they would be settled, they would be magically simpler, like resolved. So is it like that for you guys? Show of hands. It's not quite like that for me either. So the uncertainty pattern looks like this. I'm trying to make the very best decision on when is it safe to travel? Where should we go? Should we even go, given that our animals are so old, they could die any day now? Exactly what kind of fridge should we buy? And is it even safe to drink that fridge water out of the filter? Or how best to reach out to a beloved sibling after a squabble? And I realize these are mundane uncertainties, that I'm not searching for a bomb shelter, that I'm not worried about waking up in the morning. Uncertainty is still a big part of my life, but thanks to Pema Chodron's book, Comfortable with Uncertainty, I now know that there's many, many right choices and creative heart-centered responses to life. There's not just one. I've also noticed that phenomena follow their own laws according to their own natures, and we can either be in accordance with that or not. In either case, we eventually find out that there's no self in charge of much of anything. I cannot say stop, to pause my circumstances, to delay my aging, somehow buy time. And what has happened around that is kind of cool. I've become a little more aligned with not knowing, more accepting of it, and even a little bit intrigued by living in that mystery. And so this is very unlike me. Never in a million years would I have guessed that I would say this. I'm a person who plans and diagrams and measures and checks again. And I can say I'm getting more comfortable with uncertainty. Okay, now this next part may be a new thought or a stretch for some. Others will recognize it as a core Buddhist teaching. It's connected to repeated patterns, to causes and conditions, and it posits, what if we, our very selves, are only causes and conditions, unfolding so quickly, so quietly, so thoroughly and seamlessly, that we occur to ourselves and others as fixed entities. And we don't even question this I-ness, this me-ness, ever, until we hear this particular teaching that we are patterns and processes unfolding seamlessly, and that we do occur to ourselves and others as fixed entities. You can understand why this is not taught much. It needs an extended course, not a brief evening for examination. This is dependent arising, or not self, the teaching of the Buddha. And he says, we're simply aggregates and patterns functioning as selves. So I'm not claiming to understand dependent arising yet. I'm beginning to understand parts of it, and I hope you might find this tip of the iceberg teaching worth reflecting on for you too. I brought a handout for anyone who wants to take a look, or if you email me, I'd be happy to send you a couple handouts on this, that at least you can look at a picture and get a better idea about it. So this practice of observing what I'm calling rhythms or patterns is essentially a practice of seeing and then letting go. This whole path is. The Dhammapada opens with the profound statement, mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind wrought. Everything generated from mind. As we use our minds to notice now what we regularly think and do, we gain a new kind of freedom from habit by way of awareness. Musician, performer, and Buddhist Laurie Anderson says her teacher, Yonggi Mingyur Rinpoche, taught her that we can learn to feel sad without being sad. Isn't that interesting? We can nurture the ability to completely feel and hold emotions and thoughts without collapsing into them. We can let things move through us and then just notice what that was like. This is a masterful shift, particularly if you've ever experienced being completely hooked by anger or swamped in grief, unable to gain perspective or footing. So consider this. What if this were the last time for any of your patterns to happen? I don't think this way to be morbid. To the contrary, I find that as John leaves the house, I often think, look at this dear man, kiss him, have a brief connection. What if it's the last time? We don't know. This deepens our relationship with the moment. Bhikkhu Analayo says when he teaches, this may be your last breath. Could be. Cannot be sure. You may scoff at this, but one day this will be true. When we imbue our daily patterns with our heart-centered awareness, with sati, there are subtle shifts. Parts of the day are a tiny bit slower and fuller. The heart feels just a little lighter, and the moments seem a little sweeter. My reason for pointing all this out is that these moments are the molecules of a life. I've only named a few, but we can remind ourselves every day that we are always becoming, always arriving, always departing simultaneously, impermanent. We can stop perceiving time as merely a linear continuum. As we become more present to our lives, literally any moment can open like a flower or become like a note in a song. Everything be enough. Maria Popova writes in The Marginalian, we are but organized atoms that shimmer with fascination and feeling, destined to disband into disorder, to become unfeeling stardust once more. So in closing, I ask you to look at your organized atoms that shimmer with fascination and feeling. Your daily, weekly, your lifetime patterns and actions, scrutinize them. They're destined to disband into disorder, and have insight now about how all this contributes to your sense of becoming, of being, of having a life. Thank you for your attention tonight.